As Dad said, I was president first off during the 90s, and my recollection of the 90s was certainly as a competitor mostly. I guess as a president we had quite a lot of volatile club meetings and committee meetings back then with a few issues of the day, but certainly the camaraderie that I got from competing in the Riverina series, which was mentioned before, with guys from Shepparton, Wagga, Albury Wodonga, and also the North Eastern Car Club, is something that I'll treasure forever. So those days were fantastic. We don't have that series or those events anymore, and it's all the clubs, I think, suffer because of that. And it would be great to go back to those days, but I guess we have to move on. Rather than give a blow-by-blow recollection of what happened in the 90s, I just thought I'd maybe go and mention some of the changes and challenges that the club have faced and will face in the coming years. Certainly in my time as a member, I guess as an active member going back to about 1985, so I guess we're all getting a bit older, aren't we? I guess the Good Oil is a perfect example of change within the car club. When I was a young fellow, I remember going out to, when the Good Oil came up, we used to go out to Jill Murray's place out at Tarrawinji. The Good Oil was produced by typing the stories onto a stencil, would then get put onto a Gestetta machine and then printed off for the club members to get sent out. We used to have these big nights with putting the magazine together, as I'm sure many of you will remember over the years. From then it sort of got a bit more technology oriented. I remember Graham Handley writing pages and pages and pages of articles for the Good Oil. He kept the Good Oil going for many years, and then from there those handwritten articles were put on a computer as the computer generation started to come forward. We then went into desktop publishing, where all the pages are done on screen, and it's moved on from there with email, with websites. The club has a website now, which I hope a lot of you have seen. But the technology has certainly changed over the years, whereas we had deadlines maybe a week or so before the Good Oil back then. Now, in reality, you can email the editor a story the day before and it will still get in, so times have certainly changed. I guess moving on to paperwork, the technology has been great for reducing the printing costs, the postage costs for clubs. Certainly our club and many other clubs, sub-regs, entry forms, those sorts of things used to be printed off by the hundreds of copies over the years. Nowadays they're just made into a PDF document, put on the internet, and people download them and print them out themselves. So that's been great for reducing the costs for a club in that regard. But while computers are supposed to make things easier, they usually make things harder. More often it increases the workload, mainly because we expect more. There's more work involved in all sorts of things with the club now. More paperwork for rallies, for motorcarnas, for carna crosses. And of course, finding directors for those events is something that hasn't become easier over the years. There's many directors here who've been, I guess, famous directors in the club over the years, and we've still got directors in the club, but finding them now is certainly a tough job. Not so much because people aren't willing to get up and put their hand up to do the work, but there's so much involved now as far as the paperwork and the legalities of organising an event, whether it only be a club motorcarna on a Sunday, right through to a Victorian Championship rally. So things have certainly changed a lot. But as a club, our membership is quite high, and that in many respects is due to the classic historic registration program that a lot of you would be aware of. We get a lot of members within the club now who in reality we never see, but we get their membership money every year, and as a club member that enables them to register their car on the CH scheme, or the historic scheme as it's now called. Active members remain about normal in the club. I guess those who have been involved in the early years know that if your club membership is 130 or 150, there might only be 15 to 20 who are really active members who you see at all events. They're on committees who are doing the president's job, the Good Oil job, whatever it might be. And that hasn't changed over the years, but we're still going. But having said that, we're certainly not on our own in that regard. Other clubs that I've been involved in, with tennis clubs, cricket clubs, football clubs, they're all in the same boat. So while we struggle to get the numbers, we struggle to get those people to put their hand up, we're certainly not on our own, so we need to make sure that, I guess, we keep our heads up and make sure we keep striving forward for what we believe in. Moving forward, certainly the NECC is heading in the right direction. We've got club room improvements which have been mentioned earlier on, and Ray's put a heap of work into that, as have a lot of other members. We've got a new kitchen, we've relined the walls, we've got new floor coverings, we've got heating and cooling in the club rooms now. We've got a 52-inch plasma TV out there, which hopefully those there tomorrow can have a look at and watch the V8 races when they're on while you're there tomorrow. So things are going in the right direction for the club. But there's certainly challenges ahead of us. Retaining the membership numbers will be a real key to the future of the club. And as we said before, it's good to have the members, but making them become active members is the real key. Running rallies, which has been the heart and soul of the club for the last, I guess, 50 years maybe, certainly isn't getting any easier. Directors are harder to find, and as Dad mentioned before, with the lack of use of the pine forest plantations now since about 2001 or 2002, we've got fewer rally cars in the club, and certainly fewer events now being held, simply because we haven't got the areas to run those events in. Our club grounds for events is another aspect that the committee is looking at fairly seriously at the moment. We're still using the club rooms at Tara, or the club grounds at Tarawinji for motorcarnas, but keeping the dust down is always a problem, and certainly last weekend we had a motorcarna cancelled because the weather has been too dry. On the other side of the coin, over the last 2 years, I think we've probably had 3 or 4 motorcarnas that have been cancelled because of the wet weather. We have an issue out there with the grounds where getting the grass to grow on the club grounds is an issue. It's that onion wheat grass, which I'm sure most of you would be aware of. Getting that to grow is one thing, but then taking the top off it with events is another thing. So we've got some issues that we need to work on there to make sure that we can use our club grounds in the dry, but also in the wet. There's also another development out at Tarawinji which possibly could have even bigger impacts on the club. As you'll notice, if you're out there tomorrow, right across the road from the club rooms, as you come in the club grounds gate, directly opposite that there's a new housing development going in. The housing development has been happening for probably only the last 2 or 3 months, but it was something the club didn't know about until we saw all the bulldozing works going on. So that's swept a bit under the radar, and hopefully as a club we can make sure that we can continue to run events over the years without the impact of those houses there. And for sure, we've got to make sure that we continue to run events.